From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place podcast, a podcast by Freemasons, for Freemasons, and of course brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the world. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 33rd Degree. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to check out our other podcast, the Scottish Rite Journal podcast, each and every week. A new podcast directly from the pages of the Scottish Rite Journal. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, really. And also, please check out our YouTube channel for more great Scottish Rite and Masonic content, youtube.com/Scottish Rite Masons. It's the biggest Masonic YouTube channel in the world. You need to subscribe. If you're a Scottish Rite Mason, you have likely heard about Rite Care. Rite Care is a Scottish Rite philanthropy that helps kids with speech and language disorders. There are Rite Care clinics all across the country, and they are supported by our Orients and our Valleys. And we have some other groups that pitch in to help as well. And one of the largest groups supporting Rite Care is the Light Foundation in St. Louis, Missouri, which was founded by the SGIG of Missouri, illustrious brother Bob Cockerham and his family. And joining us now to talk about Rite Care and the Light Foundation is Executive Director and one of my favorite people, Sheri Mistretta, and also Honorable Brother Ryan Cockerham, who's also one of my favorite people, 32nd Degree KCCH. He is the Research and Development Director with the Light Foundation. Sheri, I want to toss it to you first. For folks who just have no idea, let's start at the top. What is Rite Care?
Rite Care is a gift from God that Scottish Rite created about, how long has it been? 75 years now, I think.
In 1946, it started in Colorado, and it went from there all over the nation.
Right now, and the beautiful thing about the Rite Care program is it's not a top-down structure. It is the 180 Rite Care clinics across the United States are attached to Valleys and Orients, and we are all bound together by the shared mission to help children communicate. Great thing about Rite Care is it addresses two key problems for children: speech, language, and or communication disorders, as well as dyslexia, which is a underspoken about malady that children encounter. 1 in 4 children, and or that includes adults, have been challenged with dyslexia and requires a good deal amount of training to get past. So the Scottish Rite, by Orient or by Valley, has chosen to create programs. Sometimes they are grassroots in that the Valley of the Orient is the employer, and they actually have a professional on staff, and it's typically in the Valley building. Or sometimes there is a very integral partnership with a university or hospital, where in the Scottish Rite scholarships the care or underwrites the clinic, several different variations of the footprint, but the consistency is the same: to help children communicate through free and accessible services provided by the Scottish Rite.
And these are not cheap by any. This is not. I think that sometimes people can think, speech and language, you're going to sit down with a kid and maybe teach them to read a book or something like that. These are very sophisticated, ever evolving therapies that we're helping with.
Absolutely. You have to be served by a graduate level trained therapist to receive this care. Many times our health insurance doesn't cover it, or maybe they cover it 10 visits a year, which is a drop in the bucket for what these kids typically need. So to be able to do early detection and early treatment before these kids are really on that academic path is critical care to put forward, and to put forward for free is just, it's a gift from God. It truly is.
There's 1,000 questions here, obviously, but how does a parent know first when a kid might need some intervention in terms, because, when does it go from being baby talk to being a problem? Where is that line? Is there a line? Is that just a gray area? You got to call it per kid?
It absolutely, it's per child. Absolutely. And, it has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence of the child. We all kind of pop out and we're hardwired a certain way. And, some kids will ride a bike right off the get-go, and some fall down and skin their knee 20,000 times. But we all ultimately need to learn a bike, and sometimes it takes a little bit more. So as far as to your question of How do parents know? Well, I mean, the cool thing is we're all loving parents and want to do anything for our kids, but we're also not trained therapists. We can't identify things in our children. The key thing is by 2 years of age, a child should have well over 100 words and say them that anyone, not just mom or dad, can comprehend. Many times if they're in a daycare or a preschool situation, maybe their teacher at school might say, you know what, you might want to ask your pediatrician about this. Or mom or dad might say, you know, Johnny seems awful quiet. And the pediatrician say, you know, you might want to get a screening. So, you know, the children that are quiet or baby talkers or whatnot, it shouldn't be ignored, you know, and especially when it's the second sibling sometimes, you know, that first one is doing all the talking for them. And you don't pick it up because Johnny's now 3 years old and, you know, he says wabbit, and isn't that adorable? But it's not. And if Johnny still says wabbit by the time he's in kindergarten, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, it was me at 5.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And, you know, and so, you know, parents need to really be the best advocates. And then they've got to find the services as well. Sometimes if it's not really picked up until they hit kindergarten, a lot of times that kindergarten teacher will do a referral, and maybe it's through, you know, a special education screening. So a myriad of ways.
So what's the first stop then is a pediatrician. You talk to your kid's pediatrician and say, hey, this is what's happening.
Yep. And then that's a referral from there. Dyslexia, on the other hand, believe it or not, that's a neurological diagnosis. Is that could almost, if they would do a brain scan of an infant, you could already see.
Wow.
Are there. But dyslexia in a way is kind of like a superpower. You know, again, too, is back in the day is when formal education wasn't prevalent, but some people were brilliant builders and could spatially think. Is that many times that's that dyslexic mind that can see and build and craft, but having that traditional rote knowledge of words is more challenging. It doesn't come naturally. So speech language and dyslexia, two different animals, but both big barriers, if not identified and treated.
Then when does RiteCare, so first stop is pediatrician, when does RiteCare step in and say, hey, we got the ball?
So it depends again, valley to valley, orient to orient. A lot of times it is a preschool focused clinic, but sometimes it is school age. There are some Scottish Rite programs that will lean into as early as like almost an infant level, because one extra layer of this, Scottish Rite does not typically cover hearing aids and whatnot, but to have an appropriate hearing screening to make sure that child can hear appropriately, because that's sure a barrier to any communication. If a child cannot hear, because then they cannot learn. They can't learn the words that they can't understand. So
Sure.
Scottish Rite clinics typically will have audio screenings, and that's a key step in this to say, do you just need tubes or do you need speech language therapy?
Yeah, I don't teach speech or language, but I've taught vocal singing, and a lot of times the problem with people is not their voice and not it's their ears. They can't hear what they're doing properly. They just haven't trained that. So that's, something I didn't even really think about until you just said it, and it made that connection. So where does the Light Foundation connect? Because you guys are with the Light Foundation, which, you know, there's a real hand in glove relationship here, it seems like. So what exactly does the Light Foundation do?
So the key part with RiteCare is Bob and Stacy Cockerham created the nonprofit of the Light Foundation.
And we should say that Brother Bob Cockerham is the SGIG in Missouri and a wonderful friend. And full disclosure.
Absolutely. And they're also really cool philanthropic people that
Indeed
identified the need. You know, they have been RiteCare donors to the several Missouri RiteCare programs for years. But they just, you know how we want to participate and we want to be donors, but we just want to do more. And so they did. They created the Light Foundation, which is an independent 501c3 charity. And right out of the gate in 2017, Bob and Stacy leaned hard into how do we help RiteCare. First off, it was to look at the 7 core programs in the Orient of Missouri, and it has absolutely morphed. The Light Foundation has found several ways to help at the national level with the Scottish Rite. One of the big things is we hosted the 2022 philanthropic Rite Care conference, which
was wonderful. That was a great thing, man. I got to see that firsthand. It just blows you away.
Oh my gosh. Well, you were a key part of it. So thank you. I mean, talk about sound. I mean, you were
all I did was turn microphones on and off. I just happen to know which button turns on the microphone.
That's it's a cool skill. Not all of us have, right? Exactly. No, one of the exciting things about hosting that conference is it really broke a lot of barriers. Number one, we were coming out of COVID. The communication therapy landscape just blew up during COVID because, needless to say, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Here we all hit March of 20 and the hammer dropped, and all these little kids that were going to in-person therapy, gone. It just didn't exist. And so across the United States, across the world, these speech language therapists and dyslexia specialists had to learn a whole new trade with teletherapy. And it is a different platform. Trying to do a therapeutic session with a 2-year-old over Zoom. Yeah, we can all think of how much fun that would be, right?
Yeah.
So, but they did it. So the Light Foundation, along with the Scottish Rite Foundation, so Southern Jurisdiction, came together and really underwrote a platform for them all to speak. These therapists were tearing their hair out. How do we help? How do we change and whatnot? And so there became these monthly national conversations on sharing best practices on teletherapy. And then Light Forward, next to that was that 2022 conference was the first time everybody got together. And it was a front and center conversation with therapists and Scottish Rite leadership from across the country to say, here's the look back. How do we do it in 20 and what's it look like in 2022? And it literally changed the therapeutic landscape from here on out because kids are not bound by geographical. I can't get to the clinic.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you've got a kid, let's say you got a kid who's got, a couple of siblings and the little brother and little sister are sick. Well, you can't take them to their appointment for speech therapy, but you can jump on Zoom and do a pretty good, a reasonable facsimile thereof. And I have to stop you just because I want to give credit to the folks at Zoom who not only, helped us as the Scottish Rite, and our team was a part of this, pushing for this to happen. But they created, normally when you have a Zoom account, you can either have HIPAA compliant or non-HIPAA compliant. I mean, there's all kinds of rules that and I don't even understand all of it, but usually an account is one or the other. But they actually allowed us to take our Scottish Rite accounts and sort of split them. So we have a block of accounts that are HIPAA compliant that can be used by our therapists to preserve the privacy of the clients, of the children being served and be used. But then we've got our regular accounts as well. And usually Zoom doesn't allow that, but they kind of made a special exception for us, which was pretty cool to be able to help pull all that together. And it's worked beautifully.
Really, and they're still using it. I mean, there are several Rite Care clinics across the country that are providing therapy because the Southern Jurisdiction is underwriting that HIPAA compliant, because that's a much more expensive platform, and especially the smaller clinics don't have the resources to do. I mean, they're just trying to serve kids, and then to put a HIPAA compliant Zoom license on top is a barrier.
And we mentioned the affording things. Obviously, Rite Care, for the most part, kids get treated regardless of their ability to pay for anything. Is that really one of the key issues here, is the money to help solve these problems?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, so the children growing up in an underserved, not as strong of a school district, not as strong access to resources, mom and dad are pulling their hair out to make, to put food on the table and a roof over the head. The last thing anybody's going to do is be able to afford private therapy on top of all this. And so it's almost those at-risk kiddos are the core need, what we need to lean into, because again, we have got to get them ready for school. That is the key thing. And there are several proven factors that you need to be able to speak, to be able to learn to read. And for the Scottish Rite programs that are really focusing on those at-risk kiddos, those underserved at-risk kiddos, is a critical part of the equation. So I would venture to guess those thousands and thousands of children that are being served in those clinics would have had a really tough time in school had it not been for the Scottish Rite.
Now, just by becoming a Scottish Rite Mason, if you're a Mason, you become a Scottish Rite Mason, you're in effect helping support Rite Care and helping support the mission that the Light Foundation is helping. What else can brothers and friends and family do to help support not only Rite Care, but the mission of the Light Foundation as well?
Absolutely. Well, that's a wonderful question, because everybody is part of this. Every Scottish Rite Mason, every Scottish Rite wife, every family member can help make a difference in a child's life. Yes, we are not professional therapists, but you know what we can do is we can do fundraisers. We can volunteer at the clinics. There are many things that volunteers can do. They're not providing care for the children, but are they helping, clean the clinics? Absolutely. Are they helping doing a fund in need? 100%. Do they want to golf and golf in the tournaments that are providing care for the clinic? Absolutely. So, this is such a pride for the Scottish Rite to be able to influence and help children's lives. And it's just a small part can do it. But awareness is also the key thing, is to be that advocate in the community and to share that knowledge of their local Rite Care clinic and what it does. Nobody's a better ambassador than a Scottish Rite brother.
Yeah, and sure. And if a parent, a friend, at the soccer field or something, and my kid is having trouble with this, or, Billy's little sister's doesn't have many words, things like that. That's an opening for a conversation about Rite Care to anybody.
100%. Absolutely. And, as we said, with the presence of teletherapy, if a Valley or Orient does not have a program, that's not a barrier. I mean, that's the beautiful thing, is just the Light Foundation is working to create national websites and resources. In Missouri, we created a website for Missouri Rite Care and we just send parents right there to be able to find what is in their geographical area.
Well, I want to switch gears for just a smidge of a second here, because Brother Ryan has been entirely too uncharacteristically quiet. And one of the things, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily know this, but Ryan and Sheri too as well, you guys have been a couple of the driving forces behind getting out the cinematic reunion to people. And Ryan, a lot of I see your production handiwork all over that thing, and it is one of the most talked about things in Masonry today. Can you talk a little bit about the cinematic reunion and sort of your role in that, and I know you guys have had your hands all in it, because, it has circled back through our office a little bit, but tell me about the cinematic reunion for folks who've absolutely been living in a cave since 2020.
So it does all go hand in hand too. So hopefully, throughout this, I'll loop it back to Rite Care. But, our fundamental mission, especially here at the Light Foundation, is helping children and ensuring their success in life and ensuring their ability to be able to communicate effectively and to be able to live successful, meaningful lives. Being a Scottish Rite Mason is, fundamentally that is preparing future generations for success, in this world and in their communities. So it all starts with the fundamentals of Masonry. So when COVID hit and we were not allowed to meet in person or hold reunions or, bring new members into the fold, the question became, okay, how do we continue this in a meaningful, viable but feasible way? And the first topic of conversation came to be, okay, well, let's just hold, a Zoom meeting and do the communications of the degrees that way, because there are two methods of joining the Scottish Rite. One, by having the actual degree work and ceremonials conferred in person through the traditional means of, going through the work and doing it that way. The other is by communication, where a brief synopsis of the degree is given, the official communication and explanation of the degrees and symbols, and then the obligation. So the thought was initially, well, we're just going to have to hold, 90-person Zoom meeting over the course of 8 hours on a day and go through this rote, very unexciting way of conferring the degrees by reading them via PowerPoint. So the thought became, okay, how do we, spice it up a bit and get creative with it? So we brought in a production crew from Los Angeles to help us create an extraordinary program, which is about 4.5 hours long. But it goes through and it gives, like I said, the synopsis of each degree, the official communication and the obligation. And we got 60 members from Missouri and beyond to be a part of this production and put it together to be released at the end of 2020. So that's the cinematic reunion in a very condensed nutshell.
And I have to say, to get that done in the amount of time that you really had to do it, which was essentially, end of March 2020 through to start of December, at the quality, I mean, anybody can go run and gun it and do some slipshod production and put it out there. But this is like you said, folks from Hollywood, this is a Hollywood level production that you guys put together.
It really is, and it's been improving ever since. We had limitations, obviously, but we brought about, 8 people as part of the production crew in from Hollywood. We had people on our own. I'm a video editor and graphic designer by trade, so I helped out, in the post-production and, on set and determining, how we were going to do this and how we were going to pull it off. But really not even the end of March. We started shooting in the middle of October and edited it in the beginning of November, and through there up until basically the last minute before it went live, we were working on it here in Missouri, putting it together, not just the degrees, but about 13 supplemental educational pieces as well, talking about various facets of the Scottish Rite and everything, including its philanthropies and hitting especially on the RiteCare program. So to be able to offer that to not only people in Missouri, but around the world as a means to participate and keep the spirit of Scottish Rite Freemasonry alive during that time, but really hit on, the importance of it and the fundamentals of it and, the underlying philosophy of why it's so important and really hitting on, the success of future generations to come. And being able to talk about RiteCare during all that was just so important of an endeavor. We weren't not going to do it. And there are several trailers. Like if you're listening to this and you're unfamiliar with the program, just go to scottishrite.live and you can see several trailers of the production. It really turned out great, and it really has been a big hit, I think, around Missouri and beyond. And it's still just kind of taking off. In terms of people being able to use it outside of Missouri, as well as additional educational series that are in development right now to kind of supplement that program. So it really has been exciting, but it really does come back to, why we do this, why become a Scottish Rite Mason to begin with. And for me, it's always been about, number one, the fascination of the philosophy and history and the symbolism, but two is the future generations and the children's lives and families' lives that we impact through the goodness of spreading, the mission and the cause of the Scottish Rite. And I can't tell you how many Shriners, like I'm a Shriner as well, and I can't tell you how many Shriners I've met who became Masons and Blue Lodges just to go on to become a Shriner because of how much they felt it was an important undertaking of, to support the Shrine hospitals and everything they do for children. And I think that's just as relevant in Scottish Rite. And I think it's just as important that we, promote membership for the effect of that as well.
Absolutely. And the mission of RiteCare and the mission of the Scottish Rite, it affects more families than I think most of us even realize, because, and as Sheri was talking about just a minute or two ago, this is one of those things that, oh, look, little Johnny's 3 or 4 years old and he still can't, he says wabbit, and isn't it cute? Well, it's cute to a point, and then it becomes not cute. It becomes a problem. My bride is a very well educated person, but can't say the word bagel to save her life, and she gets teased a bit. But I'm kidding a little bit, but it is a real problem that affects people, and by being a part of these things, you are circling back and helping the other thing, and it as Brian said, it all does circle back together. But in terms of I know you guys have had to make concessions for other brothers outside of Missouri and even outside of the United States. I'll get an email that I just have to kick over to you guys that says, "Hey, I'm from Canada. I want to see the Cinematic Reunion. I'm from Brazil. I want to see the Cinematic Reunion." So it's been a huge hit. Do you know how many folks have viewed it at this point? Do you have a guess on it?
Well, we have analytics. I can't speak to the actual amount of people, but there have been tens of thousands of views. So a lot of those are multiples who will watch every single show. And we've showed it since its premiere in December of 2020. We've had a special event for it during the summer, and then an anniversary event again at the end of the year. And a lot of those are repeats, and they can't wait to see it again, and they leave feedback, and it's been an amazing journey to see how many lives this program is affecting, because it's not like, yes, it's a cinematic program, but it's not like anything else you're going to see on TV or the internet. I mean, it is our stuff brought to the screen, and that's what's so exciting about it. One of the considerations before starting all of this was, how do we do this but do it right and in a way that reaches the level that this sort of work deserves. So that's why we spent so much time and effort, and we brought out, the most professional crew we could find in that industry to be able to do it right. And again, like I was alluding to before, it's only improved. I mean, we're coming up on our 3-year anniversary this December, and it's in development now, but we have, efforts going on behind the scenes to release an edition that's never been seen before, and one of a particular quality that it keeps raising the bar on it. So
it's like the Zack Snyder director's cut of the Cinematic Reunion.
Yeah, something like that.
That's awesome. Now, I do have to ask, just in to be a good quote unquote journalist here, I'm putting air quotes around that word. What do you say to the critics who say these are not the types of things we should be showing on screen? This should only be brother to brother. This should only be in a Scottish Rite reunion type situation. What do you have to say to those? I know what I say to them, but what do you say to them?
My initial response is, I am one of those people. So it was a challenge in creating this, knowing that, okay, we're tasked with an almost impossible, charge here to be able to do this effectively enough to not offend people who do feel that way. Me being a diehard, it should only be done traditionally through the degree work. But when you cannot do that, when it's an impossibility to do that, when there are literal government sanctions preventing you from being able to do that, what do you do to keep the flame alive? And, those questions were encountered. And, the solution was, well, you just do the best darn job possible that you can. You pray about it and meditate about it and think about it and be as sincere about it as possible when you're creating something like that. Trust me, I've heard it. And, those questions were there, and we continue to hear that sort of thing. But the method of, communicating the degrees has always been there. That was the original method of joining Scottish Rite, was the communication of the degrees via one person, giving the description of the degree, because, ceremonially they weren't even, written yet. So those were developed, but that was, and, it took kind of learning about all that to kind of wrap my head around it and be okay with what we were doing. So I would invite, people who might have, issues with doing it in that method. I think it was Albert Pike. I might be wrong. Our colleague here in Missouri, who was the ritual director of the Cinematic Reunion, Jacob Thompson, who's the educational director here, would probably, be better to ask. But there's a quote out there that says something to the effect of, the Masonic degrees should evolve with the times, not necessarily changing the content, but adapting and evolving the method by which they are communicated and conferred. So I think, looking back on it, it's been a long time coming, and it probably should have happened sooner, regardless of our inability to be able to meet in person.
Yeah, and I 100%. It's not just the COVID restrictions, but there are brothers who live at such a considerable distance that they can't be a part of a valley on a regular basis, but they want to be a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. They want that knowledge, that education, and it's very challenging for them to travel. A lot of our brothers who are a little older, who have trouble seeing at night, they have trouble driving to a place or getting to a reunion. So I think it's definitely going to be more than just a COVID era tool. It's something that, as you said, will continue to evolve. And let's not forget that Albert Pike, he got his Scottish Rite degrees at a tavern with Albert Mackey. He just sat down and described them to them. And I'm quite sure they were just drinking lemonade. But, if you hold that up against what you guys are doing, can you honestly say that what you're doing is not better than Pike, who arguably reformed and reshaped the whole Scottish Rite, sitting down in a bar with Mackey over a couple of pints, getting his degrees. And again, I'm sure they were just having lemonade, but, and Pike himself hated doing the degrees on stage. It was not something that he was a big fan of, but as you said, he did know that things needed to evolve. And this is obviously a critical part of the evolution. You guys have done just such a beautiful job of it. I hated to put you on the spot and didn't warn you I was going to bring it up ahead of time, but I figured you could pivot. So
no, it's all good. I appreciate being able to speak to it. And I hope those listening can understand, that we did meet those questions head on before anything happened. And that was the dilemma. And I remember being an advocate of saying, let's not hold a 90-person Zoom meeting and communicate this via PowerPoint. Let's do something better. And it's, we have the means and the time and the effort and the people and the passion to be able to pull something off. I did not think it would go that far. I think we were expecting 50 people to chime in the first night it aired, but we had, I think, well over 1,000 the first night. And it's
I think you did too. It was, if not over 1,000, darn close to 1,000. It was a big crowd.
Yeah, no. And this stuff is, it's amazing. This is, we're, philosophical gold as far as I'm concerned. And the people that are interested in this sort of thing deserve to be able to have an outlet to appreciate it, and one that evolves with the times and it remains relevant and isn't, the same old thing, year after year. And I definitely think it's better for those, valleys who are seeking to use the program now, who, one, either don't have the people that can even pull off the degree work, or two, are just doing it, at a subpar level that, what kind of an impact or impression are you going to make to the audience or first time candidates seeing something, that's not necessarily, that impressive. Obviously, I think the best way of conferring these degrees to me is with the full-blown cast and ceremonial and costumes and everything, music, lights, you put on a show. But when that's not possible, what do you do?
Amen to that. You're 100% right. The brother to brother is the ideal way, but when you can't pull it off for whatever reason, then what? And I think that certainly addresses it. So, well, I thank you guys for so much time today. Before we wrap anything up, for folks who want to learn more about RiteCare, the Light Foundation, the Cinematic Reunion, give us the particulars there. Ryan, Sheri, whoever's got the ball. What's the best thing to do?
Well, I think definitely head to scottishrite.live, and that is a great place for all Scottish Rite Masons to really understand about how to sign up for the Cinematic Reunion, learn a little bit more. Definitely right now head to light, L-I-G-H-T .foundation. Yes, the website does end with...
These are URLs that you will enter into your browser.
Yes,
www.scottishrite.live. And I know it's kind of obscure, www.light.foundation.
That's Brother Ryan Cockerham, 32nd Degree KCCH. He's the Research and Development Director with the Light Foundation and also Executive Director, Sheri Mistretta. Thank you all so much for all the work you're doing and for joining us. You heard that web address. It's light.foundation, and the links are going to be in the podcast description. So if you're interested in learning more about the Light Foundation, about RiteCare, please check out the links in the description for this podcast. If you're a Scottish Rite Mason, you're sort of honor bound to do so. So I will expect you to go ahead and click on that and learn more about RiteCare, not only nationwide, but there's probably a RiteCare clinic near you doing great work that needs your support. I'm Maynard Edwards. Thank you for joining us here on the Tyler's Place, which is brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. And we will catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.